Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to The Pursuit. I'm your host, Ben Spangle. Great to be with you. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Would love to have you subscribe afterwards and stick around. Today's episode, I look forward to a lot of interviews. I was telling Tom before this that as I've done many of these now, this is one that I had a very nervous excitement for in a positive way, just because of how much I respect the work that Tom's done. And you are going to love this. I mean, we are going to have some incredible information for you on really helping you change your life today. So a bit of background on Tom, for those of you that don't know him. Tom Corley, he's the founder of richhabits.net, author of Rich Habits, a bunch of other best-selling and award-winning books. And I got to share with everybody listening, one of my personal favorites that everybody needs to own a copy of. I've talked about it before, but I'll talk about it again, is Change Your Habits, Change Your Life. And Tom's work is all over the world, guys, over 27 different countries. I think it's known to almost 100 million people have been exposed to in some way, shape, or form of your work. And I know you a little bit different in COVID times, but normally speak around the world, right? Traveling around the world speaking. And a bit of background on Tom too. I mean, he's the author of this stuff, but he's a CPA. He's a CFP, certified financial planner, runs a financial service firm based out of New Jersey, and big-time contributor, too, to a lot of big publications, Business Insider, CNBC, and a whole bunch more. So, Tom, thank you so much for your time. Really great to have you this morning.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm excited about this, just like you.
Yeah, me too. Hey, why don't we start with, I know I kind of give you a little quick bio there, but tell people a little bit about you.
So, my career, I guess, if you want to call it that, is CPA, financial planner. I've been doing that for quite a while. I have a master's degree in tax, so it kind of helps me a lot with the financial planning. In fact, it helped me a lot past the CFP exam. That was a hard exam, but the tax knowledge helps. So I kind of enjoyed that part of it, that knowing the taxes and beating the IRS through knowledge, not through cheating. I like that idea, just being smarter than them. And I guess the CPA world that I live in is, like financial planners, most of the people that you do business with are middle class or upper middle class and wealthy, right? You don't get much of an opportunity to deal with poor people, but I don't have to, because I grew up poor. So I know everything about it. I know what it's like not to have money, and to almost be homeless. We had that happen a few times. So I come from a really strange background. My dad had a business that was a distributor of tools in the Northeast. He actually controlled most of the Northeast at one time. Okay. And his partner, who was age 39, he died of a heart attack. Now, at the time, their business was generating probably a couple $1 million a year in net profit. So we were very wealthy. We lived in Toad Hill, okay, on Staten Island, New York, which is, one of the wealthier places to live in this area. And then my dad sold the business after his partner died, and he had to take it back 2 years later, which was a mistake. It turned out to be a big mistake. And the business that he got back was completely different. It put him in a $4 million, $5 million hole that he wasn't aware of, that the owners had created over a 2-year period. So it kind of bankrupted him, although he didn't file for bankruptcy. The old school people don't file for bankruptcy. They fight their way through it. Anyway, we struggled with poverty just to stay in our house. We were the poorest people on Toad Hill. It's the truth. Just to stay in our house, was so difficult. And so I kind of grew up with that, being wealthy and being poor. And I always thought being wealthy is a lot better, at least from my memory. Yeah. And so, fast forward to when I took over the helm here at my CPA firm, I think in 2003. Well, within a couple of months, I started doing research because of a business client who was struggling, ended up going bankrupt. And they were so emotional about, their situation that, and they asked me a question, which I honestly, none of us really had the answer to. Nobody that I knew of had the answer to. Why are some people rich and why are some people poor? I mean, if you ask that question to yourself or to anybody who's we're in the financial planning world or entrepreneurs, you know, you'll have answers, Ben, that will take you from north to south, east to west, right? So everybody has a different opinion about why you're rich and why you're poor. I decided I'm a CPA. I'm going to take an analytical approach to this. So I came up with a list I called it my 20 question list. It was really 20 categories that of really 144 questions that I asked 233 wealthy people and 128 poor people. And I really wanted to answer two questions. One was, why are some people rich and some people poor? And what do rich people and poor people do from the minute that they put their feet on the floor in the morning to the minute that they put their head on the pillow at night? I wanted to capture the whole day, their activities, what they did, what they thought, their emotions. So I had crafted these questions really to understand everything about their lives that I could possibly understand. And I had to do it in a way that they didn't know they were participating in a study, because the reality is if you're rich and I say, hey, you're a rich person, I want to interview you about how you got rich, all of your answers are going to be skewed. They're going to be, your ego is going to take over. And if you're a poor person and I want to interview you because you're poor, you know, you're going to answer emotionally, not truthfully.
Sure.
So I wanted to get a true, honest assessment of what causes wealth and what causes poverty. And to my surprise, after I gathered all of this data and analyzed it, which took about a year, I realized that most of the data points were habits. I didn't know what habits were, to be honest with you. I never thought about a habit, really. I never thought about it like in an analytical way. And so I looked at it and I said, you know, these are things that they're doing repetitively. They're doing it every day, rich people and the poor people. And the difference between the rich and the poor in terms of their habits was like the Grand Canyon, you know, with poor people on one side and rich people on the other side. So I said, man, I think I stumbled onto something here accidentally. It really was accidentally. And it turned out that, you know, my rich habits, poor habits was something that I realized could transform lives. Yeah. You know, it's important to know what to do. That gets you kind of halfway down the field. It's equally important to know what not to do, because even if you have all these great habits, Ben, if you have these bad habits, but you're unaware of them, because habits are unconscious behaviors, thinking and emotions, and decision-making. If you're unaware of the bad habits that you have, you're going to be scratching your head and saying, you know, I'm doing all of these good things and I'm still poor. So this rich habits crap doesn't work. So I wanted to understand both sides of the coin. And let everybody see, you know, 360 degrees that, you know, this is, and so this is kind of, you know, what got me, that study got me started on this. And then I ran some learning sessions, and the first year I had quite a few people that had really positive experiences in their lives, and increased in income and increasing their income. They lost weight. They, you know, they got new jobs. All sorts of really good things started to happen. And so they peppered me about writing a book about my rich habits and my poor habits. That's what I was calling it at the time, and I still do. Yeah. And so I said, you know, I don't know how to write a book. I'm a CPA. But one thing I learned is that CPA exam is so friggin' hard. I said to myself, if I can pass the CPA exam, I can write a damn book. Yeah. It can't be harder than passing the CPA exam. So I read, my rule of thumb whenever I don't know something is to read 3 books on the topic. So I read 3 books about how to write a book. And when I was done, I said, yeah, I can do this. This is a lot easier than taking the CPA exam. And so I wrote Rich Habits, and it took me a couple of iterations, but I finally got it down to, I wanted the book to be something people would read. And people aren't going to read The Millionaire Next Door, even though a lot of people did. It's, you know, 350 pages, 400 pages of data. Yeah. And they're not going to read it. Not the people I want to read the book, which are poor people, people in lower middle class, and people in the middle class who want to get into the wealthy class. You know, they just don't have the desire or the. So I wrote this book, The Rich Habits, the first book, in a story format, and It took a while for that book to really become successful because I didn't know how to promote a book. And so it took me a couple of years to figure out the marketing and the promotion behind being a successful author. And so once I learned about, through the trial and error, what to do and what not to do in terms of promotion, I started doing things right, and I started having some success. And Yahoo Finance was the first bit of success that I had. They reached out to me. They liked an article that I had written, and they wanted to interview me on my rich habits. And that interview went viral. It was a video interview, and it went viral. And then Dave Ramsey, who's a radio host in the U.S., he picked it up. He invited me on his show. Then CBS wanted to interview me. Then Kiplinger's, then Money Magazine, and Success Magazine, and it went on and on and on. This journey of mine has taken me all around the world. I've been to Australia 4 times. I've been to Vietnam, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh. Been to Europe. Been to Canada a few times. All over the United States, speaking. So it's been really quite a journey for just your average, regular, run-of-the-mill CPA.
Wow, that's an incredible story. That's so neat to hear. And I think one of the things that makes your work unique is because you have that CPA, that technical analytical background, like you said earlier too, is that the research that you've done, incredibly detailed, right? Incredibly detailed. And I think also too, even what you said as well is just, here's what to do. Here's what wealthy people do. Here's what rich people do. And here's what poor people do. So it's, as you mentioned, it's not enough to just know what to do, but what not to do as well. You had mentioned earlier, and I think this goes back, you're probably coming up, I think this was around 2004, I think, mid 2000s that you wrote the book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, 2010 is when I wrote the book. 2004 to like 2008 or 9 is when I was doing all my research.
That was the research. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So we're coming up, not quite, but coming up on close to, 20 years of research here. And you had mentioned before too, you hadn't really yourself considered too much habits. I mean, habit is a big word if you're into personal development, right? And a lot of course, our listeners are, but can you talk to us about, because I know you have a lot of knowledge on this as well, maybe even just habits as a whole, kind of neurologically, what is a habit? Why do we have them? That kind of stuff.
Oh man, you just, that's like the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
I talk about most of the time with the media, they want to know 10,000 feet in the air, right?
Right.
But this research of mine has taken me down a rabbit hole, which is brain science.
Yeah.
Neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and also genetics. I've had to become a little bit of an expert on genetics because genes factor into a lot of our habits. So you can create a habit, for example, and then have a child, and that habit could alter your genes. It toggles on a gene, and then that gene can be passed along to your children. So your habits affect your subsequent generations.
Isn't that crazy?
It's freaking amazing. So what I've learned about habits is when a group of neurons, it's never one neuron talking to another neuron. It's the neurons, one neuron will be doing 50 different things as well as another neuron. But these neurons, when they start talking to each other on a regular basis, it starts to form a synapse. A synapse is when the neurons sort of, because of the consistency of their communication, they kind of physically inside your brain move closer together, right? So the more that these neurons talk to each other, the closer they get. At some point, the basal ganglia, which is a golf ball sized group of neurons in the middle of the limbic system, it'll actually grow a dendrite all the way up into where the synapse is to monitor the synapse to determine if it's a habit. Now, why does the brain do that? Because when a brain identifies a synapse, it wants to transform it into a habit if it can, if it's consistent enough, because habits reduce the amount of fuel that the brain uses, the glucose or the ketones. Those are the two fuel sources, primarily glucose though.
Right.
So the brain is like, hey man, we might be onto something here. We might have a habit in formation here, and we like that. That's efficient. It reduces the amount of fuel we need to function. So the basal ganglia goes up there with its dendrite, and it starts monitoring this over a couple of weeks. And at some point, the dendrite communicates to the prefrontal cortex because it's connected everywhere in the brain, and it says, "We've got a habit." And the prefrontal cortex gives the basal ganglia permission to stamp it a habit, so that dendrite becomes permanently impaled into that synapse. Never goes away. Imagine you're building a road, right? You build this road, this highway between two bridges. Well, just because the people stop driving on the highway or stop using the bridges doesn't mean that the highway's still not there, right? So that dendrite from that basal ganglia is marking that as a habit, no matter what, until the day you die. This is why you hear people say, yeah, it's like riding a bike. You know, once you form that habit, and bike riding this gets even headier. So whenever your habit involves physical or motor activity, the cerebellum gets involved. So now the cerebellum is sending all sorts of dendrites into the synapse. And it's so you got this infrastructure because of this physical habit, this motor habit, that just never goes away. And when you have the cerebellum engaged in habit formation, that's powerful. That's why you can stop riding a bike at 15 and pick it up at 60, because the habit never goes away. That's the strongest habits, are the motor habits are the strongest ones. I'll give you an example. I was a top tennis player in the Northeast. I was in the top 10 and 18 and unders when I was younger. And I stopped playing tennis, I guess, when I had to pay my way through college, because the scholarship I had fell through because I didn't have money to drive my car to the tennis practices and stuff. So anyway, my scholarship fell through, and I ended up becoming a janitor 20 hours a week to get through college. And
wow.
And so, you know, this was just such a difficult time period for me. And my point is that I stopped playing tennis at age about 20. And then my wife and we got relocated when I was 40 to Rhode Island. And we didn't know anybody. So I told my wife, who was miserable because she's a Jersey Shore girl. And I said, look, let's play tennis. You know, there's a big tennis court right around the corner, indoor tennis court. So we started playing tennis. And wouldn't you know it, Ben, it took me about a month, but I got my groove back, and I was playing some great tennis. And I kept doing it until just a few years ago because my back was hurting me too much. But I became actually a better tennis player than I was when I was 18. When I was 50 years old, I was one of the top tennis players in my area. And I was a better tennis player because those habits, those motor habits, never go away. So it's pretty cool. The science behind habits is just a rabbit hole that I couldn't get myself out of. It was so interesting.
Yeah. So really the habits, I mean, at the end of the day, brain wants to conserve fuel, wants to conserve energy, starts to notice, hey, this looks like this could be the formation of a habit. Let's send some dendrites up. They're kind of like little tree branches, aren't they, a little bit in a way?
Yeah, they are. They're the receptors.
Right.
So, you have the axons, which send information.
Okay.
And then you have the dendrites, which receive the information. So these neurons, if you can visualize, these axons also have branches. Right. So the axons have these branches, and they're sending information out, and the neurons that are receiving the information have all these dendrites receiving the information. The information they're receiving is neurotransmitters, they're chemicals, like dopamine, serotonin, things like that.
Amazing. I think you and I could probably talk for days on this stuff, because we love this stuff, and you're an expert on it. I mean, that's the incredible part. So brain's conserving fuel, it wants to do that. And then the thing about that, and I guess this goes into good habits, bad habits, right? Or rich habits, poor habits, or healthy or unhealthy, whatever it might be. The brain doesn't care if this is good or bad for you, does it? It's just, here's a habit.
No, the brain could care less. The brain is a selfish muscle. It only cares about itself. Now, it does get signals from the rest of the body that say, hey, you're killing me. So you have these messages being sent to the brain, and the brain prefrontal cortex picks it up and says, oh, wait a minute, time out. This habit of drinking a 6-pack a day is destroying my liver. My liver keeps sending out a signal. Please stop. I can't handle it. And so the prefrontal cortex then takes control, because it's the CEO of the brain. And it says to the rest of the brain, we've got to stop this habit because it's killing us. And so, at some point, you listen, and because you're getting the message from the prefrontal cortex, it won't stop telling you, stop doing this. So, eventually you break the habit. Sometimes you need help, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Weight Watchers. The interesting thing about habits is forming new habits and breaking old habits is much easier when you put yourself in an environment of people who have the habits you want and don't have the bad habits that you have. They will infect you with their good habits. And the beautiful thing about rich habits, at least the top, say 30 rich habits, is that they're so powerful that they can actually overcome ordinary habits. In other words, exercise is a keystone habit. If you exercise and you start losing weight, the emotions that get created by the people who are telling you look great feed into that habit. And then you say, well, you know what? I want to run more, or I want to exercise more, so I'm going to cut back on what I'm eating. So your overeating habits starts to die away. Your overeating poverty habit starts to die away. And then you say, well, you know what? I smoke, and it's interfering with my ability to run more miles and faster. So now you get rid of that smoking habit, or you cut it back, or you do whatever. And so now you've got these poor habits just kind of being driven away automatically just by adopting one rich habit, one keystone rich habit, like exercise.
And did you just say with that the keystone habit, that because one of the benefits is it starts to give you some of those kind of pleasure chemicals or those positive emotions? That's why the brain starts to do that? Yeah,
that's one of the first things the brain will do when you're doing something good that's beneficial to the body. Is it will notify you through the release of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters. Now, the people out there might be saying, well, what about drugs? Well, the problem is drugs are the artificial or fake way of fooling the brain into releasing these neurotransmitters. They're not the natural way. Exercise, eating healthy, associating with upbeat, positive people, those things, doing positive, good things, release dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin naturally. Drugs release them artificially, and it screws up the whole, that's why their drugs are such a problem. They interfere with your brain processes.
Fascinating stuff. Everybody, you're going to go back and listen to the last 10 minutes or so over and over, because this is the greater your understanding, the greater your implementation often, right? Where, you understand more, you realize, okay, here's what's happening. Here's how I can work with this. Tom, I want to start jumping into some of the differences, rich habits, poor habits. I know there's hundreds. I mean, you got, years of research on this stuff. So of course we can't dive into all of it. Make sure you get involved in Tom's work. I'm going to recommend some at the end here so you can have a deeper dive. But when we think about this stuff, we talk about behaviors and actions. We think about thinking process, thought process, activities, things that people do, they don't do. Tell us about some of the major ones that you found that are big difference makers for people, and maybe some that people never even thought of.
Yeah. So the two that popped up that one I said makes sense is the reading to learn rich habit. That was 88% of the wealthy people in my study read to learn, not for entertainment. They read to learn 30 minutes or more a day. In many cases, especially the virtuosos in my study, and we'll get into the different paths to wealth, but the virtuosos in my study and the entrepreneurs in my study, they read the most.
Mm.
They were voracious readers. I'm not, 30 minutes, you try 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day.
Really?
They were reading to learn. And so, that knowledge that they were gaining when applied to their businesses just helped them see, created opportunities for them. And I learned this, interestingly, in the financial planning business. I decided to read a couple of books written by Ed Schlott, who's a big IRA expert. And I read maybe 4 or 5 books that he had written. And then I summarized those books and I really studied them. And I became sort of an IRA expert. And I was able to help my clients more because I saw opportunities because of my knowledge. And I was able to get them into different types of IRAs, variable annuities, IRAs where they actually had the company's stock dumped into the IRA. And it was really interesting learning. And then I made more money because I knew more, and I saw more opportunities to apply my knowledge and make more money. So that helped tremendously in my financial planning business. So hats off to the self-made millionaires in my study who taught me that rich habit. That one got my kids through college. I spent $405,000 on college for my kids, and I had only $80,000 saved. So the knowledge I gained from the financial planning, learning everything about financial planning, thanks to Ed Schlott and some other authors, helped me make a lot of money so I could get my kids through college with very little debt. So yeah, the reading to learn is a big one. The exercise, this one kind of caught me by surprise because I just when we went from wealth to poverty growing up, there was like a mental shift that took place in our household, and wealthy people became evil people. So I grew up thinking of wealthy people in a very negative context, that they were selfish, greedy, obese because they ate so much and they drank so much, they smoked cigars. They had all of these horrible indulgences. That's what I was taught growing up, that wealthy people were bad. And so when I saw this exercise rich habit, it was like something like 80% of the wealthy people in my study were exercising 30 minutes or more 3 to 4 days a week. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would a wealthy person exercise? And then I find out, well, my mom and my dad taught me some limiting beliefs growing up that just aren't accurate. Mostly my mom. I can't fault my dad for that. It's mostly my mom. So I just was shocked by that one. One important one is building what I call power relationships or rich relationships, or relationships with influencers.
Right.
I can't emphasize this enough. I mean, and I want to also touch on mentors because it's kind of related. You need to, if you're poor, you need to eliminate the people you're associating with who are poor and find people who are rich. Now, it's hard to do when you got most of your family members are poor. I get that, and it's not easy, but if you're going to escape poverty, it's going to be because you've got the right people around you who are teaching you the habits, the thinking, the mindset, the decision-making behind becoming rich. They'll infect you with all of that stuff, their habits, which it is all kind of habits. They'll infect you with their good habits. And that's why it's so important to build relationships with success-minded people. These are optimists, people with a positive mental outlook, people who are learners, people who don't waste a lot of their time, and they're go-getters in life. So you want those people in your inner circle, and you want to kick the other people out of your inner circle or distance yourself from them as much as you can. Again, hard to do when you got family members. Trust me, I know this. I would get phone calls from my father when I was starting to make some money. And he would say, I need $5,000 or $6,000. Well, there goes all my savings. Right. So I get that. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. It's not. But, if you keep at it, you'll build more and more wealth. And then whatever money you accumulate will grow, and you'll have more money, even though you're dishing off some to your family members. your toxic family members or poor family members or whatever. So, those were probably three really important ones. The mentoring. I want to mention this. This was particularly true with the big company climbers and the entrepreneurs in my study. When they found a success mentor in life, that success mentor cut their path to wealth time in half and doubled their wealth.
Wow.
So finding a success mentor is the fast track to wealth. And it's also one of the ways you can build the most wealth. Why are mentors so important to success? Because mentors teach you what to do, what not to do, without you having to fail and make mistakes. And one of the things I found is in my study is the successful entrepreneurs, they made a habit of not making mistakes because they surrounded themselves with people who would help them prevent them from making mistakes, advisors, people that were in the same industry that they were in that had done it already, that were 20 years older than them. They would have these people surrounding them, and then they would tap them. I can't tell you how many times people call me now because I'm a mentor to thousands of people around the world.
I'm sure.
They call me, and it may be only a 10 or 15 minute phone call, but it's information they never heard from anybody in their inner circle. And so they, I guess I become a mentor to them or a surrogate insider to them. And it's hard for me because there's so many people that do call me, and I can't be a mentor to everybody, but I do my best, to help people. And I feel like if you're very successful at what you do, you have an obligation to mentor people. You really, especially poor people. I think you have an obligation to society. That's your way of giving back. Now, I have a friend of mine who was in my book, Effortless Wealth. He's the rich neighbor in the book, Tom Howie. He, I can't tell you how much money he retired with because he'll kill me, but it's a lot of money. And he's 2 years younger than me. And what Tom's doing is teaching poor kids in a community college. That's his way of giving back. He's mentoring them. And I think that's, a great thing because they need it. You don't get it when you're poor and even lower middle class. You just don't get what you need in terms of information and mentoring to help you succeed in life. That's why poverty is there's a generational cycle of poverty because they're sort of locked into a vacuum. So my job and my mission in life, I believe, is to open up the valve of that vacuum and let some of my information flow in so these poor people have an escape hatch.
Incredible. So, some of these really keystone habits, reading to learn, a big one, minimum 30 minutes a day. But for a lot of these people, you even said 3 to 4 hours a day, big time readers, exercise. On the note of power relationships with influencers, I think what you talked about too is that, hey, if you're poor and you want to escape poverty, and I know you've mentioned this too, I want to mention this because this is worthwhile. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up very middle class, right? And but hey, if you want to move out of middle class of just enough kind of mentality, this stuff applies too. Can you give us maybe a couple tactical things when you think about, okay, you've got these, you want to create these power relationships. Say somebody's listening, I want that. I know I need to do that. Can you give us a couple tactical ideas on implementation for that?
Yeah, one of the things that popped up in my research, which I found very interesting, is that a lot of the wealthy people were on board of directors of nonprofits. Now, you could initially, my reaction was, well, that's great. They're giving back. Oh no, they were on those boards for like 30 years. They were on the boards when they were poor.
Wow.
Or they were on the committees. So I said, wow, this is really, really a shortcut to developing or a way around your situation, your circumstance, because poor people don't have rich people around, surrounding them. So you join a local community-based nonprofit, and you'll find out on those nonprofits that most of the people who are running the nonprofit, who are on the board of directors, they're the most successful people in town. Right? So now you've just launched yourself into the one percenters. You're now building relationship with these one percenters. Now these individuals who are on the boards are also in many cases on the committees, or other wealthy, successful people are on the committees that don't want to be part of the board, or they move back and forth. Ben, like I've been on the board for 4 years. I'm going to just do this committee, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that was an interesting way, I thought, of a go around to meet these people. Another way was these mastermind groups. In fact, I'm just working on an article right now on this. If you can organize a mastermind group, it has to be in your exact industry, exactly what you're doing. If you're a science fiction writer, the mastermind group has to be made up of science fiction writers. If you're a Hyundai new car dealer, your mastermind group has to be made up of Hyundai new car dealers. If you're a CFP who specializes in variable annuities, you have to have a mastermind group of CFPs who specialize in variable annuities. So it has to be very specific. Why? Because you'll learn when you're all pulling the same cart, so to speak, you're going to stumble across best practices, best ways of doing things. And then you're going to find you're able to leverage and co-opt the relationships of the others in your mastermind group. Because everyone, even if you're poor, somebody knows somebody who's successful and wealthy. Right. It might be one or two people, even if you're poor. Well, if you have 5 people in your mastermind group, now that's 10 wealthy people you might be able to tap into. You know what I mean? Influencers. Yeah. I call them power relationships. So I like the idea of a mastermind group as long as you do it right. And doing it right is just what I said. Plus, you have to do it at least once a week, an hour a week. And everybody who's in the mastermind group has to be pulling everybody else's cart. So you have a commitment for the week. Hey, can you help me with this goal? Or I'm pursuing this, this relationship with this person. Can you help me get this, make this happen? So, you basically have maybe each person has a goal for the week. Yeah. That's realistic and can be achieved in a week, that with the other help of the other members of the mastermind group.
Yeah, that's so good. And do you think too, I think this, but do you think now, especially, we're at the time of this recording still in the middle of COVID-19, but I think because of online forums, platforms, social networking, it's probably easier than ever to create and find a mastermind group. Would you agree?
Oh, I think what this has done is it's accelerated what was going to happen 10 years from now. The pandemic, I'm trying to think of this quote, but it might have been Napoleon Hill, but I might have this wrong. But he said, in every adversity is a seed of opportunity, right? I'm probably saying the phrase wrong, but in adversity, in problems, there's always the seed of opportunity. In this pandemic, as horrific as it's been, the opportunity that's presenting itself to everyone is, hey, we don't have to spend 10 hours a week traveling.
Yes. Yeah.
We can do all of this virtually. Yeah. I mean, think about it. We're going to one day, maybe, in our grandkids' lives, we'll be on Mars and we'll be on the moon. You're not going to be able to physically, meet with those people on Earth. Right. So it's going to happen. It's the future evolution of humanity is going to be all virtual. Now, of course, you're going to still have the physical meetings because they're the best.
They are.
No doubt about it. Yeah. But this is, I did a speaking engagement in front of 1,300 people that I would have had to take 2 days out of my schedule. And I got paid a good amount of money for it. I was 45 minutes. And then as soon as I was done, I was back to doing my other businesses. Yeah. It took my son he works for a big company, Moody's, and he travels a lot because he's in the sales side of it. And he told me, you know, Dad, this is a perfect example of how this is really changing my life. He said, I would have to travel to 5 different states in a week to meet with all these different customers. I did it in one day in a 5-hour period on Zoom.
Incredible. Yeah.
And he said, I saved myself an entire week. So I think this is transformative. You know, this is a blessing in disguise. I'm sorry for all the people that got sick and died. That's terrible. You know, I'm not demeaning that. Please don't take it that way. But yeah, this is opening up incredible new world to all of us to make an enormous amount of money in a much more efficient and maybe not effective, but efficient manner.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree with you. Couldn't agree more on that. Let's switch gears. I'm very excited to hear about this. I haven't even heard you talk about it, so I can't wait to. Let's talk about this idea of what is the right path to wealth. Right.
This is so get your seatbelts on, because I'm telling you, this is, I think this is more profound and revolutionary than my Rich Habits, Poor Habits.
Okay.
But in my research, I found that there are 4 paths to wealth.
Okay.
There's the saver investor path. There's the big company climber path. There's the virtuoso path. And then there's the dreamer entrepreneur path. Now, the saver investor path is a path that's perfect for people who are just unwilling to, maybe not unwilling, but don't want to work more than 40 hours a week.
Sure.
They place a premium on their family and their friends, you know, spending time with family and friends. They don't want additional responsibilities in life. They're happy with eking out a living and doing what they do. And so the saver investors in my Rich Habits study, even though they were the poorest of the millionaires, they had, I think their average liquid net worth was about $3.3 million. So what they did was, from right out of the gate when they started working, is they saved 20% or more of their net income, and they back-ended their way into their standard of living by living off of what's left. So they said, okay, I'm putting away 20%. So really my net pay is 80% of what it is. And I have to figure out how to pay my rent, my food, my insurance, and everything. Now, it's hard to do that in the beginning, I know, but maybe it doesn't have to be 20%. It could be 10%. But the point is you forge this habit of saving consistently and automating the savings process, and then immediately investing your savings so that can grow. And what's interesting is, after about 10 years of doing this, the wealth that you create through this process, it grows exponentially. You know, you might, have invested, say, 50,000, but now it's worth 300,000. So and some of that wealth can generate a stream of income. Sure. Right. So now it helps you supplement your income. So now you can actually increase your savings rate from 10% to 20% to 30%. And so it's like a snowball effect. It just keeps growing. So you can, because you're saving and you're growing your wealth, and that's kicking off more income, you can save more. And so by the time, in my study, it took 32 years for the saver investor millionaires to accumulate $3.3 million. And that was when I was interviewing them. So, that's been how many years ago? They're probably in their late 70s now. They probably have $5 million, or whatever. The next group was the point I want to make there is, there's a personality profile that is specific and unique to saver investors. I write about it on my richhabits.net, and CNBC is working on an article right now. We're working on an article we're coming out with to share the personality traits associated with all of these paths, but I'll touch on a few of them. Okay. The next one is the big company climber. This is where you are going to devote yourself to one company, and your goal is to climb the ladder. Now, obviously everybody wants to be the CEO, CFO, or whatever, COO, but you don't have to get to that level to benefit from being a big company climber. An example is, I have quite a few of the big company climbers in my study who never became the CEO, CFO, or whatever, but they became, like the tier underneath them.
Sure.
And because they reached a certain level, they were introduced to all these things that the other people in the company weren't eligible for, and that's restricted stock units, stock appreciation rights, non-qualified stock options, stock grants, all of these things. And what they do is once they get to that level, they'll have years where their stock compensation is $600,000-$700,000, and the base pay is maybe $175,000, right? Mm-hmm. So, and in the big company climber category path, about 90% of their wealth was attributed to the stock compensation. Now, it doesn't have to be just publicly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be publicly held stock. It could be, you could be, a partner in Price Waterhouse, or a big law firm, or a big medical practice. Yeah. It could be private, where, everybody's partners. It doesn't have to be publicly held. So but clearly the ones who made the most money were the ones that had access to the public securities market, Right. And so the personality traits there are, to be a big company climber, you have to be able to tolerate politics. There are people who are big company climbers right behind you who are trying to cut the back of your Achilles heel and take you down as you're climbing the ladder. So there's that you have to deal with. There's so you have to become an expert at politics. You have to become an expert at building relationships with not only those above you, that's obvious, but those who are at your level in different parts of the organization, because you never know, they might jump up and become higher level people. Sure. And they're going to remember what a great worker and how hard you worked. You have to take on responsibility that the saver investors would never in a million years take on, because that responsibility that you're taking on, if you fail, you could find yourself out of a job. So there's risk associated with, you have to have a high risk tolerance to be a big company climber. And the high risk tolerance also is embedded in the fact that a competitor could come along and buy you out. And the next thing you know, you're on the unemployment line. Yeah. Right. So there's a lot of risk. You have to have this, you really have to have high risk tolerance, be able to water off a duck's back. People can throw knives at you and you're Teflon. It doesn't bother you. Right. You have to be really, really good at building relationships. That means you have to devote time to building those relationships. Happy birthday calls, happy birthday cards, life event calls, hello calls. You have to do all of these things. And this is all information that's on my website. It's not mysterious in the ether out there. It's all on my website. Now let's move to the virtuosos. The virtuosos are individuals who are the best, among the best at what they do in their industry. Okay. Easy examples are Tiger Woods, LeBron James, Elon Musk. Yeah. Right. This he's not only an entrepreneur, he's a virtuoso, which is another point. You can be multiple things. You can be a big company climber and a saver investor at the same time. Right. So using Elon Musk, he's a virtuoso because he self-educated himself. He knows more about rocketry and rocket science than a lot of rocket scientists who got PhDs. Yeah. Just because you don't have the PhD doesn't mean you can't be a virtuoso. But more often than not, there's skill-based virtuosos and there's knowledge-based virtuosos. The knowledge-based virtuosos typically are individuals who had some schooling. They went to college, graduate school, PhDs, and things like that, law school, medical school. Yeah. So they're virtuosos because of their education, which means that you have to devote an enormous amount of money and time. That's one of the traits. Do you have the personality trait to study for 7 hours a day in order to become a virtuoso, which is kind of what it takes if you're going to school. Maybe it's not 7, maybe it's 5, but you get the point. And if you're, and do you have the money? You might come from poverty. It's going to be hard for a virtuoso to become a virtuoso if you're coming from poverty, unless you can get loans. So that means now you have to take on debt. That means you have to have some risk tolerance. You have to be, because there's good debt and there's bad debt. Yeah. Right. If you were Dave Ramsey, he would try and hit me over the head and say there's no such thing as good debt. Yeah. But there is.
Yeah.
And there's the good debt is the debt that virtuosos create.
Mm. Sometimes
the big company climbers who have to go into debt to get a college degree to get into the big company.
Sure.
And the debt that entrepreneurs they need to not only start but grow their business. It's debt that where you're creating an asset versus debt that you're using for consumption or spending.
Yeah.
So good debt is debt that you use to create an asset. A home is good debt. Education loans are good debt.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, if you come from poverty or lower middle class, you're going to have to go into debt if you want to be a virtuoso, maybe a big company climber, but certainly an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go into debt. So you're going to have to get comfortable with that. So the virtuosos are unique in that they have this intense ability to focus for long periods of time on one thing. They can practice a skill for 4 or 5 hours a day. They can practice subsets of that skill for a couple hours a day. They just become really single-mindedly focused on becoming great at that skill. So the knowledge-based ones, they have to do a lot of studying and learning. And so, you have to have that personality where you're going to be able to sit behind the desk for long periods of time, or on a tennis court, or on a basketball court.
It sounds like a true virtuoso, this is a pretty, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation, but there's a very obsessive component to single-mindedness. Yeah?
Yeah, you might have to have a little OCD in you. Right? And certainly Elon Musk has that. He's admitted it. He's got OCD. He's got, he can't turn it off. When he's locked into something. He'll go for 20 hours. He said when he was creating the forerunner of what became PayPal. Yeah. I can't remember what the name of the company was, but it got bought out by PayPal. Yeah. He said he was working like 130 hours a week. Wow. Sleeping, eating, and then working. And so that you have to have that, certainly if you place a high value on spending time with your family and friends, you're not going to be able to do that. So it's not, it doesn't fit into, there's requirements and there's personality traits. It doesn't fit into the requirements bucket. Yeah. You're not going to do it. Yeah. So the last one is the dreamer entrepreneur. Yeah. And the dreamer entrepreneur, they're very unique. In my study, they accumulated the most wealth, 7.4 million on average, in the shortest period of time, 12 years on average. Now, what makes entrepreneurs so unique is they have an off-the-charts risk tolerance. They have an off-the-charts ability to handle stress. They have an incredible ability to focus on problem solving. They're great at building relationships. So they're very gregarious and outgoing, like the big company climbers are. Saver investors, virtuosos, they're content with being behind the scenes. They don't need to be gregarious. But the entrepreneurs need to be gregarious. They have to be, in order to build those relationships with influencers who are opening doors for them. And they have this incredible work ethic, like the big company climbers and to some extent the virtuosos. They have this real hard work ethic. They're willing to put in the time. So that's a requirement. Are you willing, in the beginning stages of growing any business, any entrepreneur initiative, you're going to be devoting an enormous amount of time. Now, at a minimum, it's going to be 50 hours, but you can promise yourself that it's going to be at least 60 to 70 hours a week. Yeah. It's just is. There's no way around it. I mean, I don't know how you can be successful or not as an entrepreneur. So you have to have that, you accept that. And I think one of the other variables is if you're an entrepreneur, you better have a spouse. You better have the strongest marriage in the world. Because if the stress and the cash flow problems they experience in the first 5 years could drive you to divorce court. So you got to make sure you've got that thing ticked off, that you have a very strong relationship. Your spouse is on board. Yeah. So these are and what's interesting is each path has their own specific rich habits. And so I've written about that on my website, and I think the article that CNBC is coming out with will have that in there. So it's you have these rich habits that are unique to saver investors. Save 20% or more, consistently invest, associate with frugal friends, people that have this, the same mindset, that are frugal and they are savers. The entrepreneurs, they have their own rich habits. Reading to learn, practice. It also happens to be for the virtuosos, and they get up early. That's another rich habit that I found in the virtuosos, big company climbers, and the entrepreneurs. They have that common rich habit. So if you want to see all the personality traits, it's on my website, richhabits.net.
Okay.
It's somewhere there. You just have to look at the category. I have a category on my articles.
Perfect. That's incredible. That is phenomenal stuff. I'm so glad that you went through that. And, again, hey, you're listening today, you can kind of get an idea. You probably already know, even if you're not where you want to be, you probably already have an idea of which of these do I fit into, right? Which more suits me. And I like how you talk about it. It's what's the right path to wealth. Well, there's not one way that's the right path. It's going to suit you, and figure out what does suit you, which I just think is incredible. Two of my favorite questions in the entire world, and they've become even more important in the last few weeks to me. What do I want? How do I want to live? What do I want? How do I want to live? Tom, I think what I love about your work so much is that really, especially guys, get involved in Tom's work, get on his website, richhabits.net, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. richhabits.net. Get some of his books. Again, I love Change Your Habits, Change Your Life. It's very tactile. So Rich Habits is more of a story, the book, correct? Right. Rich Habits is.
Yeah. It's a narrative. Rich Kids is a narrative.
Okay.
Effortless Wealth is a narrative.
Good.
Change Your Habits, Change Your Life, and Rich Habits, Poor Habits, they're not narratives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the entrepreneur dreamer on that side of stuff. So I like narratives too. Don't get me wrong, but I love tactical learning, growth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So based on your personality, that it's the right fit for you.
Right.
I went the big company climber route for 10 years and I realized, oh my God, this is the opposite of right for me. I wasted 10 years of my life, Ben. So it's really nice to figure this out when you're 18 years old,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. So good. Hey, this is just kind of a selfish one. I know the answer to it, but I love it. And I think this is important information for people too. I think there's a mistaken belief, just going back to a rich habit. I think there's a mistaken belief that, because you'll hear a story about Musk or something like that, Elon, right? Working 20 hours a day. But I think as an average, there's a mistaken belief that you've got to give up sleep all the time. Can you talk to us about the study of millionaires, wealthy people, and sleep?
Yeah. So they slept, the self-made millionaires in my study, particularly the entrepreneurs and the big company climbers, they slept an average of 8 hours a night.
Wow.
Sleep is the most important thing for health. It's the most important thing, because what happens during sleep is your brain cells shrink, the lymphatic fluid flows into the brain, and then it cleans out the brain of all the toxins that you build up during the day. So if you're not getting enough sleep, 7 to 8 hours is what you should be getting. If you're not getting enough sleep, then those toxins build up in the brain, and then when you're 65 years old, you start to have Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment. And so the sleep is probably the most important. It's more important than eating right and exercising.
Wow.
Sleep is important. And the self-made millionaires in my study, they slept a lot. And it also helps reset your emotional baseline. So if you can imagine, if you're in the entrepreneurial world, and the big company climber path, where you got all these jerks that are, screwing up your day, the stress that you have to tolerate. Well, you need that sleep so that your emotional baseline gets reset. Yeah. And then you can start all over the next day. If you don't get enough sleep and your baseline is here when it should be down here, then it's going to throw you off because you're going to go over I call it the rain barrel effect. Your rain barrel is going to overflow. And you're going to start making bad decisions. You're going to start losing your control of your emotions, things like that. So this is all, sleep is fundamental. Now, as to work hours, when I started running this firm and I started doing the research, it was 10 hours a day tax season was off the charts. That was, in the beginning days here, it was like 15 hours a day, but now I have more people helping me. But so what I had to do was get up at 4:30 in the morning, because the only time I had was 4:30 to 7 in the morning to do my Rich Habits stuff. And then I usually isolated 7 to 7:30 for exercise. I always was consistent. And then I tried to get to bed at 9 o'clock every night. That was a big deal for me. And there are some people that can get by the way, on 6 hours of sleep, 5.5 hours of sleep. What makes sleep adequate is the number of you go every night. There's 5 sleep cycles,
right?
And they 4 to 5 sleep cycles. It averages about 90 minutes.
90 minutes, yeah.
Okay. Now there are some people whose sleep cycle only lasts 50 minutes or 60 minutes. They only need you need at least a minimum of 4 sleep cycles.
Right.
So if you can get by on 4 sleep on 5 hours a night, because you're getting 4 sleep cycles and you're fine. Yeah. So I just want people to understand that. But if you're struggling and you feel you're tired all the time, it's because you're not getting the 4 or 5 sleep cycles in every night, and you might have to add a half an hour of sleep.
Yeah.
It's more important. It's more important than anything you do in your life, getting sleep.
Incredible. More important than anything you do. And I want to give, because I was reviewing this before our time together today. When Tom says, most of the millionaires, I reread the study, 89% were getting this kind of sleep. So we're talking almost all of them, more important. So thank you for sharing that. Question for you. One thing I love to ask our guests is, I'm a big reader. I know you're a big reader. And tell me, I'd love to hear for you, maybe the top, 2 or 3 books. I know there's so many, but so the top 2 or 3 that have had the most profound impact on your life, or ones you love, you recommend to people.
The one I paid my kids to read this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I paid them when they were beginning high school. I paid them $25 each to read the book, because I knew that book. If you only had one book on an island, that would be the book you should have. But then if you're on an island, you don't need it. But my point is that's the most important book I've ever read in my life.
Yeah.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. Another one that I thought was really, really fundamental to my understanding of success, or the brain and success, was Thomas Murphy wrote a book on the subconscious mind. I encourage everybody to read that book. That book is a great book. Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World. I got kudos to Og Mandino. I used his book as a template for Rich Habits.
Nice.
Because it's just such a well-written book, and the story's so good. Yeah. But because I get this question, Ben, so often.
I'm sure.
I put on my website, Rich Habits, my list of the top self-help books.
Cool.
It's not just self-help books. It's books, biographies.
Yeah.
The book I read about Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, Hilton, the guy that started Hilton Hotels. And
right.
I have these are biographical books of really successful people. One of the things you're going to find out is it's interesting how often they screwed up in their lives, and still, despite their screw-ups, became successful. So I like reading books of successful people, because success leaves clues, and inside these books you'll find all sorts of clues. And if you read enough of them, like I do, you're going to find out that they all have common habits.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool, that biographies.
I love it. So really review on that, everybody. Top few: How to Win Friends and Influence People, Power of Your Subconscious Mind, Greatest Salesman in the World, and then biographies. I love that. Thank you for that, Tom. So, hey guys, get connected with Tom. Go to richhabits.net. There's a bunch of great information on there, tons of amazing information on there. He's got a package on there for dream setting, creating your ideal future. That's a free PDF to even walk you through it. But go get connected with Tom, get to some of his books. Just in closing, Tom, as we wrap up today, anything you want to leave our audience with, just final thoughts on maybe moving from where they are to where they want to be?
Yeah. So your mindset is critical to your success. So there's a lot of people who struggle or they get frustrated. I know I was one of them. Trying to be successful is very frustrating. One of the things that shifts your mindset from negative to positive, and I use it all the time, is expressing gratitude. So now I'm not going to get all spiritual here because I'm not into that crap. But if you look back on yesterday and it's 8 o'clock in the morning today, I want you to look back on yesterday and just pick out 3 things that went right. 3 things that went right with your day. And just say, I am so grateful that this happened. I'm so grateful that that happened. And I'm so grateful that that happened. Why is it so important? Because gratitude is the gateway to a positive mental outlook. And if you want to be successful, you will never, ever be successful if you have a negative outlook on life. It's impossible. You will fail and you'll stay failed. You have to have a positive mental outlook, and it's critical. You know, look at some of these billionaires who thought that they could create, like the guys that created Google. What gave them the right to think that they could create something that would profoundly change the world? Well, they did. They were optimists. They believed in themselves. They had a positive mental outlook. Positive mental outlook keeps you moving forward. Negative mental outlook keeps you stuck.
Yeah.
And you'll never be successful with a negative mental outlook.
Incredible. Thank you for that. Tom, thank you so much for your time, man. This is wonderful. I'm excited to go back and listen to this many times myself. And I know people listening are feeling the exact same way. And I know, you know, part of your mission, well, I didn't know that until today, but learned from you. Part of your mission is just really, it's ultimately, how do you help the people that, whether they're poor, lower middle class, how do you help them create their ideal future? How do you create their ideal lives? And the work that you're doing is massive. It's massive. And I love it. You made a difference in my life, and I know you're making a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And it's awesome, man. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I know you love today. I know you love this episode. Share this episode. Make sure you share this with at least one person, but you're going to probably want to share this with a whole bunch. If you run a team, anything like that, share it with your family. Let's get this out there. If you're new to the show, go and click subscribe. Leave us a quick review. We want to get this information. We want to be bringing incredible guests like Tom, more and more people to more of the world, so that we can all collectively go and make a bigger difference and really go and get the lives that each and every one of us wants to go and get. Thanks for being with us, everyone. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Ben.